Excellent. So welcome everybody. Another STC webinar. Today we have Philip Guest from Oxford Strategy talking to us about how to identify your sustainable competitive advantage. Should be a really good session. Just to remind everybody that this is obviously part of a series. We have been doing one of these every week since the lockdown begun, pretty much. We're actually going to take a break from that for next week. So next week is July the 9th, where actually we'll be having an online event for our digital and advanced manufacturing special interest group. The theme of the event is opportunities in the new normal. So we'll have a number of case study companies talking about how the pandemic has influenced their behavior or their products or their strategy and what they've changed and what new opportunities they've identified. What's very interesting with that as well is that we've teamed up with the Midlands Aerospace Alliance, but also Medilink UK. So it's not just STC companies. We'll also get examples from the aerospace industry and also from the medical industry, of course. So should be a really interesting event. We'll also have a gentleman called Nick Brown talking to us. He'll explain about the changes that have happened at the NHS. Sorry, Philip, I'll just stop your sharing there for a moment. So Nick is going to explain how the NHS has changed and what the opportunities are for the different people in there. So if you're interested in the medical arena, then please sort of join that. Should be very interesting. Andrew Mayer from the Midlands Aerospace Alliance will do something similar for the aerospace industry, so we'll get their perspective as well. So it should be very interesting. So slightly different format for next week. Again, all the details are on the STC website, so please check that out. But then we'll continue our webinars program after that, with the next sessions being about business data and how to make the most of that and how you can really increase the profitability of your business doing that. So that's about enough for me. As I mentioned earlier, all our future events are on our website. All our past webinars are on our YouTube channel. So please check all of those out. And of course, always get in touch with us if there's any, if you have any questions, or if you're interested in running a webinar with us, please get in touch with us as well. And we can talk about your ideas and what you want to do and have a look at how we can make that happen. But we'll leave it there for now in terms of an STC point of view. So I'd now like to hand over to Philip. So Philip is one of our ACES Special Interest Group champions. He runs Oxford Strategy, is an occasional lecturer as well at a business school, and is going to talk to us about how to identify sustainable competitive advantage within your business. So over to you, Philip. Yes.
Pim, thank you very much indeed. Thank you, STC, for hosting these webinars and letting me speak. I guess during COVID, it has been an unusual time, and I personally have really appreciated the fact that, Pim, at STC, that you stepped up and actually used the ability to do Zoom calls, which are quite time efficient for all of us, to create a platform where we can share ideas. So thank you very much indeed for that. This presentation came out of a conversation that Pim and I had a couple of months ago, which was how do you turn COVID from a challenge into an opportunity? And I think Pim had that conversation with lots of people and lots of speakers, and sort of what happens next kind of question. And I know that all of you, all the entrepreneurs out there, would have been working hard and focusing on the day-to-day of helping your business through the difficult times we're in at the moment, difficult decisions about furloughing staff and the size of the organisation, managing cash flow, taking loans from the government, taking loans from elsewhere, managing the equity in the business. And this must, of course, be your day-to-day focus. However, what Pim and I were talking about was what happens when you have a moment to get away from the day-to-day? What happens? Where should you be thinking? Where should people be? Where should all of us be thinking? And this includes me and it includes Pim. what should we be thinking about in our spare moments, when we have a little bit of downtime, or we need a little break from managing the day to day, which in some cases can be very chaotic and very difficult. And what I revert to when I'm thinking about my own business, I revert to this concept of sustainable competitive advantage. And the reason why I like it is because too often companies, mine included, try and grow for the sake of growing. And often what happens is that in growing for the sake of growing, we get into businesses that we're not well suited to. They don't grow as fast as we would like them to. They don't make the margins we want them to. They consume more cash and investment than we'd like. They don't generate enough cash, and they take too much time to manage. That diversification can sometimes be the enemy of profitability. And I'm sure there are bits of all of your businesses that you look at and think, well, maybe I shouldn't have got into that. It doesn't work, isn't profitable on a day-to-day basis. And I think that this concept of sustainable competitive advantage, understanding why it matters, understanding where it comes from, and understanding how to find it, is a simple idea, but a very powerful idea that lots of my clients use. Lots of other business schools will teach it around the world. It's not a new idea, but will help you think a little bit about what happens in the next quarter and the next year, rather than just what's happening in the next day or two. So let's step forward. I'm trying to explain why the words here are very important. The idea of sustainable competitive advantage is different from the idea of competitive advantage, and it's different from the idea of simply being competitive in your business and in your marketplace. I mean, running a competitive business, building a competitive business, is a really, really difficult thing to do. And we know that it's difficult by the number of startups that fail. And so for anybody to build a business that is competitive is a truly remarkable achievement. And as a competitive business, you'll have a decent market share. You'll be making probably the same profit margins as other companies in your industry do. And you'll be surviving from day to day. You'll have people who you feel responsible to, but you'll have those employees. And hopefully you'll be making some money for shareholders as well, which hopefully you are one, if not the major one. But competitiveness on its own, although it confers some profitability, is not as good as having a competitive advantage. Competitive advantage means that you're doing something different from something better than your competitors. Your competitive advantage means that you'll probably have a bigger market share than other people in your industry. It probably means that your profit margins are bigger than other people in your industry. It'll mean that you're generating more cash than other people in your industry, and you may be investing less because you're investing smarter. So having a competitive advantage is definitely better than being competitive. And in the winner's podium metaphor that I'm using here, competitive advantage will give you a silver medal as opposed to the bronze medal for competitiveness. I mean, these are all good. Everybody's on the podium. But for me, the gold medal is sustainable competitive advantage. And the reason why the sustainability bit matters, and I'll come on to how we find this, is not sustainable in an environmental sense, but sustainable in an ongoing sense, which is that you may be competitive today, you may have a competitive advantage today, but what you really want is a competitive advantage that continues into the future, one that you can hold on to for a long period of time. Because that means that your extended market share, it means that your superior profitability and superior growth that come from competitive advantage will be maintained. We've all seen companies that had a competitive advantage, but it wasn't sustainable. Think of a company like BlackBerry, for example. It had a competitive advantage for 5 years maybe, but that competitive advantage was competed away. It wasn't sustainable. And that's why BlackBerry essentially collapsed as a business. So let's think about how you get competitive advantage, because it's okay to say, oh, well, you know, how can I be competitive? You should be competitive, you should have an advantage, and it should be sustainable, and that's what you should be looking for. But I mean, those are outputs, really. They're outputs from something else. And so for what you need to keep in mind is how you generate competitiveness. And enabling competitiveness comes from doing something that has value. I mean, that's sort of self-evident, but sometimes we forget it. You need to do things that other people want. You need to create products that other people want. You need to do things that other people place value upon. And that's the starting point for building competitiveness. But as I said, that's a bronze medal on the podium. What you really need to do is have some sort of competitive advantage. And of course, competitive advantage comes from rareness. It comes from having something that others don't have. And then finally, in terms of sustainability, what you need is something that others cannot copy. And so while value creates competitiveness and rareness creates advantage, it is this inimitability that creates sustainability. And I'm sorry about this word, inimitability. If anybody can come up with a better word that describes the fact that something cannot be copied, then I would be absolutely delighted to hear it, because I've been looking for one for about 5 years. But we'll stick with inimitability. It just means what other people cannot copy. So sustainable competitive advantage, that's what you're looking for: value, rareness, and inimitability. The question next is, I think, where do you look to land your business? And that's in the middle of all three of these things. Rareness on its own doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a successful business. The fact that you've got some intellectual property that other people cannot copy doesn't mean you're going to have a sustainable competitive advantage. And the fact that you do something that people value doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have a sustainable competitive advantage. It needs to be all three of these things. Let me illustrate something by way of example, which is in the automotive sector. A lot of people are talking about the massive amounts of data that autonomous vehicles are going to produce. And they talk about it with a presumption that it's going to be an enormous revenue stream for the OEMs, because they identify that that data has some value. And of course it has some value. But the issue for me, and why I think the data story for autonomous vehicles is not the right story, is because that data is not rare. Lots of people have data about what you're doing and how you're moving, including your mobile phone provider. And it's certainly not inimitable. So that's why we need to look for value, rarity, and inimitability for sustainable competitive advantage. The next challenge that I would offer to you is, don't think about this in terms of products. Products will be, I mean, we all look for the unique selling point in our product, but when you're looking at how to build your business and what your sustainable advantage is, the product is simply an output of the things that you do with your assets and your resources and your capabilities. Yeah? This is where I would look for your sustainable competitive advantage. That's where I would be looking for the value, the rareness, and the inimitability. You can look at the products because it will give you clues to the things that you do that are valuable, rare, and inimitable. But it's not the products that you're looking at. It's what your assets, your resources, and your capabilities are. I'd also say be very cautious about thinking about a partnership as being either valuable or rare or inimitable. It's the inimitable bit that bothers me. Most people, most of your suppliers or partners will probably have a non-exclusive relationship with you. And even if they have an exclusive relationship with you, it's probably time limited. So if you build your sustainable competitive advantage on the basis of something, a capability that somebody else has, there's always a risk that it will be taken away from you. And if there's a risk that it will be taken away from you, then it's probably not sustainable. So look inside your business, not at what it produces and not at who your partners are. So it's a great idea, but I want to offer you a practical way, a quick and practical way of doing a self-audit to find where the value, rareness, and inimitability is within your business. Now you can do this. Pim's going to circulate these slides after the event. Use this as a template. Start it as a 10-minute exercise or a 5-minute exercise over a sandwich or a coffee. But just jot down what all your assets and resources and capabilities are within the business. And look broadly, look very broadly, and then score each of them for whether they're valuable or rare or inimitable. and then produce a rank. I work out what the overall score is. I use the lowest score of the three on the basis that a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And then rank those attributes, rank those assets, resources, and capabilities in your organization in order to find out which are the ones that offer you most opportunity for that sustainable competitive advantage. So the one I've done here, which I was going to walk you through, is using, with Pim's kind permission, although I didn't ask him, and he hasn't signed this off either yet. He said he's got some issues with it. Is to look at the Silverstone technology cluster as an example, and there it has dozens of assets, resources, and capabilities, but I just picked 5 here. I would suggest you brainstorm yourself or with your management team about what you've got in your business, and then literally go across and score them and look at the location of the Silverstone technology cluster is incredibly valuable for what it does. And so I score that as a 5. It's very rare. I mean, we can argue whether it's a 5 or a 4 because there are other business organisations dotted around Buckinghamshire and the Midlands and England and the UK. But when it comes to strong localisation, the Silverstone technology cluster is where it's at. And it's very difficult for anybody to copy that. It has high inimitability by virtue of the fact that it's based around an enterprise zone and it's got the backing of MEPC. So I would score STC as 5s on all of those, and the lowest score amongst those 5s is a 5. And when it compares to the other attributes, that ranks as 1. On the other hand, let me look at the brand. Yeah, look, it's a very rare brand, and it's probably quite hard to copy. But the brand itself, I'm not sure that the brand itself necessarily is that valuable. It's the Silverstone bit, and I don't mean Silverstone as a motor racing circuit. I mean Silverstone as a collection of like-minded businesses is the bit where it's at, which is why the location is more important perhaps than the brand. Look, we can argue about this, and Pim will argue about this, and he'll probably change all of the numbers in here. All I'm trying to do is illustrate to you how this scorecard would work for you guys. I really think that, you know, after this or over lunch or coffee or maybe this evening when you're sitting down, just grab a piece of paper, write down all of the assets and resources and capabilities that you have, score them on the 3 dimensions, value, rareness, and inimitability, rank it. And what you'll get is you'll get some things that pop out at the top. And I would suggest, there are lots of different business models that you can use, but this is a very good one. If you're not going to build your business around those valuable, rare, and inimitable resources, then you probably need to have a very good reason for understanding why not. And if you're building your business around something else, try and find a way to make it rare and to protect it and to make it inimitable so other people can't copy it, because that's where the sustainable competitive advantage will come from. I'm a picture kind of guy rather than a words kind of guy. And I apologize for the unicorn, but there's only a limited number of icons that I can search through to find something that represents rareness. But the point here is this: if you want to be on the top step of the podium and you want to generate some sort of sustainable competitive advantage, then you need to look inside your business for those resources which are at the top, valuable, bottom left, like the unicorn, they're rare, and bottom right, you can keep some control over them so they can't be copied. That's it. It's a simple idea, but hopefully it's very powerful. I welcome any questions, not just today, but going forward. Please get in touch, and also any feedback that you have about whether this has been useful and whether you've tried it or not. Pim, I think I hand the floor back to you.
Excellent, thank you, Philip. I think that's fascinating. I hope you all agree that was very insightful. I mean, obviously, we'll open it up to questions now. People have the ability to unmute themselves, so if you have any questions, then obviously give us a wave or use the virtual raise your hand. I mean, one of the things that I like to ask, just to kick things off, if I'm sitting here with a business and I kind of feel I don't have anything that's rare or uncopyable, if you want a different word. Also awful word, by the way. What do I do then? Because I think it's very powerful, the sort of the exercise that you've proposed, and it's a very interesting way of thinking about it, to identify, you know, the power within your business, and how that will allow you to look at what makes your business unique, and therefore where you can take that, and how you can make the most of it. But what if you're doing that exercise and then kind of go, well, actually, I don't have any of that stuff. What do you do then?
Well, I'd first of all say, Pim, don't be so pessimistic. I think you might find that that you probably do. And I've been through the same challenge myself with Oxford Strategy. And one of the exercises I did was I talked to my friends, my suppliers, my clients, my business associates, people that I knew through business associations. Well, as you know, Pim, I spoke to you as well. And I asked them for their opinions on what it is that I do that's good and bad, and what I do that other people can't copy. And I had some surprises, and some of them were very pleasant, some of them were unpleasant. But you know, it was good to hear from people. So do ask around, but have a think. But you probably do. Have a think about yourself and your personal brand and what you do, because it might very well be that what's valuable and rare and inimitable about your organization is you as a person, and that you may very well have, you know, you bring some particular skills or experience to bear that other people don't, or maybe you assemble some ideas and experiences that other people don't have. Yeah, because if you're the guy that is the battery expert and you happen to have worked in logistics, then you probably are in a better position than the guy who only works in logistics, or the guy who's only a battery expert. No, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I interrupted you, beg your pardon. Yeah, I agree. The point being is, it's not just the individual building blocks of a process, it's how you combine them together with the resource, the people in the organization. As we all know and have all been taught for many years, people are our biggest asset, and our skills and ability to adapt and to be agile. And yeah, people that you work with buy into you, Phil, I'm sure, not just the process books and knowledge that they can get off the bookshelf. That's the difference I've found, even with working with a lot of people in a common industry that have very similar product range, or come from a base level of processes. I found the way the service they offer, not just the product, which binds in the relationship and the network, and how you deal with people, respond to questions and resolve issues. That is also something, you know, we are unique, and that's the uniqueness of the imitability that you've talked about, finding new uniqueness and keep chasing that.
Indeed. And the other thing to mention is that what I've talked about is today's sustainable competitive advantage. There is always the opportunity to go and create new competitive advantages in the future, and I would call that innovation. And you can go and innovate, and it might very well be that in an industry, as Les suggests, where maybe there's been a low level of customer service in the past, you introduce a high customer service level product, and that could be your competitive advantage if building the customer service is something that's difficult to replicate. Likewise, it might be that you're working in a very high touch industry where customer service is really very expensive. Maybe you want to go and create a product where there's actually very low touch customer service, yeah? But you take a lot of the cost out, but people have to do self-service online. So, you know, all is not lost, Pim, but I also would say, I think you probably do have some VRI, and I'll happily share it with you another time.
I wasn't necessarily talking about me, but more. Does anybody have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I've just got one question, well, I'll probably have more, to be honest, but another question. Putting anybody on a pedestal puts them as a good target to aim for everybody else. So that really brings everybody up. So how do you go about, once you're on the gold medal #1 spot, #2 and #3, and also #5 and 6 that you can't even see yet are after that place? So what's been your approach to going for the next level of differentiation?
Well, there's two answers. So one is that if what got you there in the first place cannot be copied, then it will last for a long time. So if you have something that's patented, for example, that's sustainable. That advantage will stay with you for a long time. But then think of motorsports, maybe as an example. The value is generated from ultimately from speed, but let's focus on the speed. Comes from speed in enhancements, and you need those enhancements to be something that's unique to your team, because otherwise you won't be going faster than everybody else. So you get a speed enhancement, it's unique to you. And of course, what you want to do is make it hard to copy again. So even if it doesn't feel hard to copy, think of ways of making it hard to copy. Disguise it, hide it. Don't let people know precisely what the secret source is. And the final one is, Les, and it comes back down to this issue of innovation, which is always be thinking outside the box, always be thinking of the other things that you can do, always be thinking about what the technological changes are that you can harness in order to develop new products and new ideas. And more importantly, to develop new skills and capabilities yourself as a business. Because ultimately, it's not necessarily about saying, I make product X at the moment and I need to learn how to make product Y. It's a question of, I use this skill to make product X, and I need to develop a new skill to build product Y. And the products are simply outcomes of that. And actually, maybe what you do is once you've built the skill to build product Y, you then go, well, now I've got this skill, how can I deploy it? And it might be with different products or different sectors. Who knows?
Is that kind of why you wouldn't necessarily look at the products individually? Because I was quite interested with your example on the BlackBerry thing. Because if you know that you're in a competitive advantage situation that is kind of limited for like a 5 year or so, then presumably the exercise is to maximize that competitive advantage while you have it, while in the same time having a look at what you could do to maybe launch a different product or a different service or whatever, to build up that competitive advantage in another product. And so it's really the core of your business on what you do to bring those products to market, as opposed to just focusing on the projects and hammering the profit out of that, I guess.
So this sort of arc of reinvention, which, I mean, BlackBerry almost got it right. I mean, they started with this little device which had a tiny little keyboard on that was absolutely brilliant for picking up emails when you weren't in the office. We can argue whether that's a good or a bad thing, but we have to live with it now. You know, extend your working day beyond 5 o'clock with this little screen and this little keyboard that you tap away with your thumbs. And for those of us, or for those of the world who wanted to show enhanced productivity and be always on, it was an absolutely fabulous device. The next thing that they did, but they got stuck behind this idea that they were a device maker. And in reality, the other part of what they did that was supreme was that they had this method of integrating with enterprise email systems, which, when you think back 15 years ago, that sort of thing was actually it was non-trivial. It's not like, you know, today where everybody's on a Microsoft Exchange server and it's just a question of slightly reconfiguring it to a different device. In the old days, it was really hard. And they could do that, and they could do that better than anybody else could. But when the smartphone came along, rather than doing what I'd call a pivot, and saying, well, I used to do this and that used to be my competitive advantage, let me now rotate and find my new competitive advantage, rather than them becoming a software provider to integrate smartphones into corporate email systems, which they eventually did, but did very badly, they stuck with this device. They stuck with the device idea. And so, you know, they nearly got it right by looking at what inside they were good at, because I would argue that their proposition was this little device. The value the value came from their ability to integrate into corporate email systems, the fact that that was a rare skill and it was very, very difficult to copy. And if I was them, I would have gone down that road. But, you know, hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? And so, you know, I don't claim any special insight in that regard.
But it's kind of interesting, because I think your exercise is probably also a good methodology to make sure that you don't get in a situation where you can't see the wood for the trees, and it probably helps you to not go down those line alleys. Because if for some reason BlackBerry went, oh, we're a device maker and that's what we do, and hey, nobody wants to buy our devices anymore because there's better versions out there, it's kind of like they kind of got stuck. in that, and I ideally should have taken a step back and go like, actually, what is the real value that we add to people, and what's the thing that we do better than everybody else, was exactly the exercise you're describing, and it sounds like they didn't really do that.
And it's very tricky because, you know, if you become too contemplative of what your skills are and what your resources are, and you then go out and try and sell those to clients, want to buy what you're good at. Yeah, they want to buy a product that helps solve their problem. So if you're, you know, if you are brilliant at if you're BlackBerry and you're brilliant at integrating with corporate email systems, no one's going to buy your product because you're brilliant at integrating with corporate email systems. They're going to integrate. They want to buy your product because it makes their employees more productive. Yeah. So you can't, you know, you have to be careful about, you know, you should look inside for your sustainable competitive advantage, but it doesn't mean that you can avoid, that you can stop having that customer-centric view. But when you're going out and trying to build the products and services that people want, if you want those to be more than competitive and you want to have more than competitive advantage and you want to sustain it, then look inside for the things that are valuable, rare, and inimitable that you do, and use that as the foundation for building products. And when you're trying to grow and expand your business, which everybody will do at some point in time, be cautious about just creating another Me Too product because it's something that you know your clients want, because you might not be very good at doing it.
Yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. I mean, I suppose there might be some skeptical people on this call who would kind of go, well, that all sounds really nice, but I mean, is this really going to work? What difference is it going to make? You know, what's the point? What would you say to that? Obviously, I'm not one of those pessimistic people, clearly.
No. I think it's fair. I think it is fair. You know, if you want to stress test this as an idea, I would suggest try this short exercise, which is take two parts of your business. Take one that is you're very happy with, that's profitable and growing and has good market share, and take one that you're unhappy with, that isn't growing, isn't profitable, and doesn't have great market share, and have a look at doing this exercise, a really brief version of this exercise for those two different bits of the business. And I would hope, although I'm happy to be proven wrong, I would hope that the one that's doing well will prove to have value, rareness, and inimitability, and the one that's doing badly will be missing one of those three things. Remembering my point that the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. And hopefully, I mean, I would expect that in 90% of cases, that exercise will be true. If that does, that should hopefully then give you the confidence to go back and do a longer version than a 5-minute version, but a 50-minute version of the exercise, in order to pick apart what the things are that you do that are valuable and rare and inimitable. Because if you remember the 3 interlocking circles, you have to be in the middle of that. Having 2 isn't enough. You can have the most, you can have the rarest, you can have the greatest idea in the world protected by the greatest patents in the world, that nobody can copy, that only you can offer. But if it doesn't have value for clients, then, you know, what's the point? You know, it's like, you know, GoPro was going to conquer the world, but actually most people are not interested in sticking a small camera on stuff and filming everything that they do. I mean, there are some applications where it's great. I've got friends who go motor racing and they scatter their cars in GoPros that then fall off and land on the track and smash other people's cars up and upset people. But, you know, but in general, it doesn't, you know, GoPro was an amazing product. You know, there's a lot of rareness, a lot of inimitability in the stuff that they did and in the technology they had, but ultimately it wasn't something that people wanted.
Well, I suppose at the same time, I mean, your exercise could also help people identify, because you may well be able to identify the first 2 and then kind of go like, but actually the problem that we have is that, you know, it is not inimitable. I struggle with that word actually, so, or uncopyable. But then maybe it will allow people to kind of go, well, actually, what can I do to achieve that? You know, should I patent it, or should I keep it a trade secret, or, you know, all that sort of stuff. So I think you know, the exercise
or
would be
you
quite a good exercise anyway.
Or you settle for the fact that it's a temporary competitive advantage. I mean, look, a competitive advantage is a great thing to have. Yeah. I mean, you know, back to the motor racing analogy again. You know, this is Formula One. I'm no expert on Formula One, but my understanding is that this season Mercedes were going to dominate because they had this push-pull steering wheel that created some interesting impacts in the front suspension and the way it acted with the road. Yeah. Now, actually, the reason why that's not going to be a competitive advantage next season is because it's going to be banned. But if it wasn't banned, then you could be reasonably sure that other people would have found a way of copying it. But it doesn't alter the fact that actually having a series, you know, ultimately your sustainable competitive advantage might be the ability to create a series of unsustainable competitive advantages. So you become an innovation company, and your ability to innovate is the thing that is your sustainable competitive advantage, which is, I think, what a lot of motorsports companies look for in their supply base. It's just a continuous stream of innovations.
And then once you've identified that, you can then look at what you could put in place to foster that and grow that and enhance that further.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, the mindset of being able to innovate and invent and productize stuff that comes from science or just crazy ideas or engineering, yeah, is in itself actually a very valuable, very rare, and very inimitable talent. Innovation's really difficult. And if you can glue all that together, and it's back to Les's point about how you assemble people in your organization, yeah, if you can build an organization which has some innovators in it and some strategists in it and some implementers in it and some polishers in it, yeah, then you've done something that is very hard for other people to copy in itself.
Yeah, I think if I could just add to that again, is that whatever the outcome of the processes and the techniques, what you bring to market will be limited in its uniqueness, because people will copy. Even with patents, people will copy and don't worry about the consequences sometimes. So having a product or process that you think is unique for a period. And how long that is depends on how robust it is, but it's going to go. So well, you rightly say, being innovative, but not just in product. It's the way you build the total solution to solving the problem. Because as you rightly say, we're not selling products, we're selling solutions. And hopefully, anyway. So that's my bit to that as well. It isn't, sustainability doesn't mean it's rubber stamped and that's it. It means you have to continue this. People that succeed have created their business plan, and tomorrow they're doing another one. And the day after, well, you know, relatively speaking, maybe in the next 3 months, they're doing another one. And in the next 3 months, you're doing another one. So you can understand what the market is pulling and pushing. So you adapt. And that's
yeah. I mean, look, you know, even like, take pharmaceuticals for example. You know, if I can create an amazing drug that addresses, well, you know, maybe I can develop a sort of a COVID-19 vaccination. You know, and I have some intellectual property rights in that. They expire. I don't know what it is in pharmaceuticals. Is it 30 years? I think in pharmacy, I'm not sure. But ultimately, you know, my rights in that drug and that process will expire in 30 years' time, and people will start building generic versions of it more cheaply than I've been selling my version. So, you know, sustainable is a very, you know, it's not an infinite term. There are very, very few things that people can do, because they'll find, that people will find a way around it. But if you can build something that lasts for, if you can, the point is that building a degree of inimitability is going to make it last longer, and that's what makes your competitive advantage last longer. And it maybe you just hide it, or you make it difficult, or maybe what you do is you continually enhance it. Yeah. So you have a radical innovation that is the foundation of your company, but the incremental innovation that you add on top of that radical information is what keeps you just ahead of the pack, and keeps you just ahead of the pack in either performance terms or maybe cost reduction terms. It means that the other people who are trying to copy you never quite catch you up. So it is a dynamic thing.
And presumably, Philip, if if I was sitting here and going, look, mate, I'm an engineer, I like making bits, you know, yeah, sounds like an interesting exercise, but to be honest, I don't really know where to start. You know, what does it all mean? I mean, presumably, and we'll share the details, your details with everybody at the end of this this webinar. Presumably, they could always contact you, and you're quite happy to run them through this exercise and many others that I'm sure you can bring.
But you know, I'd also say,
by the way.
you know, here's one thing is that, you know, making bits is, there are lots of ways of for manufacturing to be innovative and build a sustainable competitive advantage, because two things that customers are always going to be looking for is one or both of cost down or quality up. Yeah. And that's, you know, if you can cost down something for your customers, or you can quality up for your customers, then that's a competitive advantage. How you turn that into a sustainable competitive advantage means that you're constantly working to improve the product, rather than just working, rather than just sitting on your laurels. But I mean, you know, I think, you know, it ill behoves me to tell that to people working around Silverstone who are involved in motorsport, who know about improving things every single day, because that's what they do. But if I had this conversation with people in a different part of the country where there isn't motorsport culture, the idea of continuous improvement would be, you know, not obvious to them, although it's obvious to you.
Yeah, excellent.
But yeah, look, you know, and I'd be delighted, you know, please, you know, I would encourage you, do go away and do the 5-minute version of it, and do compare it for an outperforming part of your business versus an underperforming part of your business. And, you know, if I've got it wrong, please tell me. I'd be really interested to know. But also, you know, just give me a call. You've got my contact details. Happy to talk it through. You know, I enjoy doing this stuff. And if I can get, if I can show that it works, and that's just next time I do one of these presentations, it's another example for me to give, if you don't mind me mentioning you.
No, absolutely not. I mean, on that same note, I mean, while we have Philip here, I mean, are there any other questions or comments or anything that anybody wants to raise with Philip? I'm always keen that everybody gets, you know, when we close this down, that everybody feels they got the most out of this. So, you know, don't be shy, and by all means engage if there's anything from anybody. Chris, you can unmute yourself. Chris, yeah.
No, thank you very much, Phil. I think that's really good. There's certainly a lot in it, and I think as well as seeing sort of where you do want to go, it's equally as valid for not just products you've got, but where you don't want to go in products you're thinking of going into, isn't it? And certainly we do a lot of work. We definitely sit in the category of having great people, having a great capability to innovate, but how do you sell that? And we've gone through various ways of doing that, and some ways have worked quite well and others haven't. And one of the things we found that is applicable to definitely strongly to other STC members is we worked out that in order to sell our, because one of our sort of services is that we're capable at designing a very broad spectrum of stuff, and the integration of that and being able to get that sort of at the very front edge of innovation working well, coordinating quite a lot of different technologies in one go, but it makes it a very broad offer. And what we've ultimately done is targeted some areas that we quite fancied having a go at that sat well within the sort of structure that you're proposing, and were very helpful and still are. But then understanding that once we got involved in particular products, we could use that philosophy to then really get our teeth into it and run with a baton, as it were. And then suddenly we're not just trying to sell a very broad spectrum. We've got some particular examples or particularly promising avenues where we can sell. But for us, then the challenge is, having done a success in some of these areas, is then explain to people that we don't just do those areas. So we're sufficiently successful enough in some of those, and they're great little parts of our business. But equally, we still want to have these other revenue streams. So to redirect people is the next challenge. But yeah, we certainly found it hard as an STC member with a capability that was people-led, and the ability to engineer and build, you know, effective things in small volume was such a broad offer, although based on very specific capabilities, that it was difficult to market. So I would say the tool that you've got there is great. To see it reiterated is great. And yeah, because you end up a bit like with the example you've given, where location is rated very highly. How you build a strategy around location is the next challenge, isn't it? Because it's an open philosophy, isn't it? It's like, great, I've Silverstone, great. How do I make something that, you know, that pays out of that ultimately?
Yeah, and it's the geography thing is always very, very hard, because you'll end up working in different sectors if you move geographically further away. But then I know from what I know from different sectors, maybe the answer to that then question is that you go to another tech hub where, I mean, take agri-tech for example, which I know you know a lot about. I think there's an agri-tech hub in Harlow. Does that make sense? I'm not sure. There's an enterprise zone in Harlow, which I think is agri-tech focused. Is that, maybe what you do is you have a second geographic hub there, where you fall into a cluster, like Silverstone Technology Cluster, but that's different again. And you rely and refer back to your motorsport heritage and the ability to integrate at speed with success first time, because that's part of the motorsport heritage. But then geolocate next to agri-tech, and I don't know what the other clusters are, but there are a few around. You can do that sort of thing, but it is a challenge. But the thing is that, and Chris, you've mentioned a few of the other considerations that matter, is that this is not, this is just one part of how to use strategy to build your business. Because there's another whole bunch of stuff about making sure that what you do is relevant for customers and that you communicate it in a way that they understand. On the one hand, anybody who knows performance projects knows your ability to integrate innovative stuff is exceptional. And if you need a project doing where it's integrating stuff that's not been integrated before, you'd be on the list to do it. But that's your reputation amongst people who know you. Communicating that to people who don't know you, it sounds a bit like you just said you can do anything. And everybody who knows you knows that it's impossible to do everything. And so, you need to then sort of narrow it down into something a little bit more tangible, like here's a agri-tech thing we did, and here's a motor racing thing that we did, and here's a water sports thing that we did, and so forth, to give them the idea of, some pictures. And that's not what I'm talking about today, but what I'm talking about today is if integration, I don't know, it's not fair because I don't know the business well enough, but if the answer is assembling things that have never been assembled before in a short period of time into a project that works first time is what your VRI is, then that's what your VRI is. And that's definitely, keep going at that. I would say think carefully about diversifying into other things in motorsports that are not to do with that, as tempting as they may be, because you're probably not going to do much more than offer a Me Too product to other people that other people do as well. But I don't know, this is just one of, there are lots of different other models that you should use and lots of different frameworks and business skills. This is just one. And sometimes you'll want to ignore this because there are other considerations that matter more. So I'm not saying it's not a magic bullet, and it's not a must do, but it can be helpful sometimes.
And it sounds like we could do quite a few follow-up webinars, Philip, which I'll have a chat with you about.
Yeah, look, I'm really, I enjoy doing this stuff. So, just give me a buzz. I mean, Neil knows that I'm always keen to get involved, even though sometimes the projects don't necessarily get to the stage where I can be helpful, but there'll be other ones, hopefully.
Excellent. I'm kind of conscious of time, but we would have questions, time for another question. So does anybody else want to raise anything, or is anybody happy? Moira? Yeah, I've unmuted.
Oh, there it is, got it.
Oh,
no.
Oh, you've done it.
There we are.
Confusion reigns. Yeah, Philip, sorry I was late. I was obviously on a,
don't worry,
so I missed the beginning, but I've picked the gist of it up. I guess we're a software business, and we have products that sort automatically data for clients. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. We're always thinking about development of the product, and we're always doing that. I guess the thing that I challenge myself with is it's very easy in the IT world to add bells and whistles, because most developers love fancy bells and whistles and things. Some of them are clearly very valuable and important, and our product is built on some of them, for sure. But because most of the time, in fact, I'm going to say 100% of the time, because the difference is marginal, all the time, when we're promoting our product, looking for new clients, we're selling to people who know nothing really about what it is we do under the bonnet, okay? And care less. They've got to, they're going to pay and they want to solve. So I suppose the challenge for us, and the challenge that I struggle with all the time, is so I try and keep a broad eye on what's happening, what other people are doing, you know, what other people are saying, commentators are saying about how our particular market in business intelligence is what we do is moving, and think about how we can reflect that and so on. But of course, the issue, especially for a very small business like us, is that we don't have a pool. We're not like the motorsport guys who have a pool of people, if you like, that they can check an idea with. We just don't. You know, as I said, our clients have no idea how it works, don't care, don't want to know. Yeah, and actually, very often I'm speaking to potential clients who have no idea they need what we do. They don't, you know, they honestly don't know. Our biggest competitor is Excel spreadsheets, actually. Yeah. So figuring out how much effort and cost to spend on a variety of different potential developments is a real challenge, because you can go down a lot of blind alleys. And so, yeah, just some thoughts on clearly I could go and spend a fortune with Gartner to go and do some testing for me, but we ain't got that kind of money, so that's just not going to happen. So just your thoughts on that, really.
And nor do your clients. I think one of the challenges in running a business like yours is that you are competing against, some of your competitors are very big, very scary companies who offer what you do as a very small part of what they do. I would argue that the competitive advantage that you bring is unerring customer focus, because you only do one product, you only do business intelligence, and there are lots of other people who offer it as part of it. And so you should be able to build a better business intelligence product than they can for the money that you spend, because you're closer to your customer and you're making the product development decision. So for me, that's possibly where your sustainable competitive advantage comes from, is your size and your agility.
That's true.
The other, I mean, but do the thing, because agility is something that can be on there, or centralized decision making can be something that's on there. There are lots of other companies where you're competing against, where the marketing person, the product development person, and the finance person sit in different buildings, and then you're sitting there, and so you can do that in terms of product. But then that comes down to the innovation side and the product development thing, which is, and I'll happily send them to you if you get in touch with me afterwards. You know, there are some other. I mean, I've got a whole bunch of simple tools that I use, because for me, strategy is not about making things complex. It's about finding the one really simple thing that you can fix.
Absolutely.
There's another tool that I use called the value proposition canvas, which you may not have heard of. Yeah. And for me, the value proposition canvas is the go-to thing, because if you can, it's that issue of, it's pains, gains, and jobs to be done. And if your customers are doing jobs on Excel spreadsheets, which should be done through a database or through a proper business intelligence service, then you just need to find out how many of them are there out there, and educate them. Educate them the things to be better. It's what I call inchoate demand. You know they need it, but they don't know they need it, and you just got to tickle them over the line and educate them. It's the same problem that Chris is saying with new customers for him. which is how do you explain to somebody who doesn't understand what you do that they need the product that you have? And I would sort of say I'm not the marketeer, so that's the point where I go, I'm not the best person to help. But you're asking the right questions, definitely.
Excellent, very, very interesting. I'm quite conscious of time, so I think we will leave it there. So Philip, thank you very much. I think that was.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time, everybody. Thanks for your contributions. I really appreciated it. It made it much easier for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Now, what we normally do is that I run a little poll at the end, so we can get your feedback on today's webinar, but also future subjects and all that sort of stuff. So I'm kind of just launching that now, so you should have that in your screen in front of you. It should take about 40 seconds to complete, so hopefully not too much. So I'm going to use this time to say goodbye to our YouTube viewers. Thank you very much for viewing. Hope you enjoyed it. Obviously, check out our other videos and check out our website as well for upcoming subjects. But thank you very much.